A Chinese Communist Party-linked plot to collapse phone networks in New York City was uncovered by Secret Service a couple weeks ago and is actually a lot bigger than first suspected. The plot that was first uncovered involved a network of 300 SIM servers, 100,000 SIM cards located throughout the New York area, and now an even bigger part of that plot has been uncovered. On this point, reports are coming out from the United Kingdom where the Chinese Communist Party is allegedly using critical infrastructure as a tool to pressure diplomats. And the communist regime is also allegedly doing this as a way to pressure them to approve a massive new embassy for the Chinese Communist Party. I'll be going into these topics and a lot more today. I'm the Epoch Times senior investigative reporter Joshua Phillip, and you're listening to Crossroads. Welcome to Crossroads. A plot to collapse phone networks has been shut down. This could have been a massive cyber attack against New York City. The Chinese Communist Party is exposed in this operation. Now, its involvement is raising alarms over its war plans against the United States. Was this plans for a war? And now there are ongoing investigations into whether the CCP has other operations like this across the country, because apparently there are more. Now, this has to do with the takedown of these SIM cards and other systems. It was a huge server farm, all these phones, everything, and they were using it for malicious services, sending out constant spam things, again, calling in the SWAT team against people they didn't like, things like that. And they've now just uncovered a second site, one just like it in New Jersey. ABC News said this. They say a thwarted plot to cripple the telecommunications system in New York was bigger than investigators first realized. Adding to the urgency of their search for answers, sources told ABC News there was a plot, they say. And it said federal agents discovered additional locations, plural, meaning probably even more than just two, and more equipment as they worked to determine the ultimate goal of what the U.S. Secret Service said was a China-linked plot that could have crippled every cell tower in the nation's largest city, jammed 911 calls, and unleashed chaos on communication centers. They basically could have shut down the entire communication system in New York City, including emergency services. Now it says this. Agents from Homeland Security Investigations found an additional 200,000 SIM cards at a location in New Jersey, law enforcement sources told ABC News. It says that's double the 100,000 SIM cards, along with hundreds of servers that were recently seized at 5 other vacant offices and apartments in and around the city. Multiple locations. And briefly, too, the SIM cards, every one of those was basically working as a fake person on the internet. 100,000, 200,000, a massive network of fake individuals they were using for various purposes. Now, that's according to the sources, the investigation began after several high-level people, including at least one with direct access to President Donald Trump, were targeted not only by SWATers, which is when you call in a fake hostage situation and the police have to send in the SWAT team, guns drawn, kicking the doors down, guns in their faces. You can kill people using this. They call in SWAT teams, but it says also with actual threats received on their private phones. The CCP was making threats against American officials, allegedly. Now it notes this. This is setting off alarms in how the CCP basically could potentially use a system like this. This is making people really pay attention to this. And remember also, this comes after the discovery of kill switches that were installed in China-made solar panels just recently. So that raises a question. Was the Chinese Communist Party, in a war scenario, planning to shut off our electric grid using these kill switches in its solar panels? Was the Chinese Communist Party plotting to shut down the entire phone networks in New York and maybe elsewhere? Well, that's what they're saying. That's what they're saying they just uncovered. A Chinese Communist Party unconventional war plan against the United States on American soil. This is one of the biggest discoveries they've had, probably ever. This represents the Chinese Communist Party doing malicious operations right here in the United States, targeting American officials, including notably one guy right next to Trump. Now, like in light of the recent finding, Michael Lukey, CEO of State Armor, he wrote this on X. He said this story is an act of war by the Chinese Communist Party, and it said it's infiltrating our critical infrastructure and pre-positioning digital bombs to destroy our utilities. Basically, insider threats, bombs, things to blow things up, but you don't need to physically blow it up. You just need to shut it down. And he added, quote, states must protect critical infrastructure and feds must deport and imprison all CCP agents ASAP. And frankly, I couldn't agree more because there are thousands upon thousands upon thousands of Chinese Communist Party agents who operate openly in the United States under the United Front. I could point to some right here in New York City. I could walk down the street in Chinatown and point to them. They are all over the place and nothing's done against them. Now, Congressman Nathaniel Moran, he also added, quote, this is why America must treat the CCP as our top national security threat. And look, on this point as well, this is not unusual for the Chinese Communist Party. This is how they operate. This is how they use things for short-of-war tactics. It's how they pressure diplomats. It's how they try to pressure people to get things done. They threaten them. They harass them. They do everything. Reports are actually coming out of the United Kingdom right now as we speak. The Chinese Communist Party, according to local media there, they're using critical infrastructure as a way to pressure the UK diplomats. The Communist Party in China is allegedly doing this because they want these diplomats to try to help approve a massive new Chinese embassy in the UK. Daily Mail said this. It says China is switching off the water. They're switching off the water supply to British diplomats in Beijing, again, because they're the ones making the calls on some of this, to force the government to cave into its controversial demands for a mega embassy in London. It has been claimed. It says the ploy is said to be the latest tactic by President Xi Jinping, the leader of the Communist Party, to ensure that he gets approval for his plans to build a complex at Royal Mint Court in the city, in the UK, of course. And notes, despite grave security fears, the government is expected to soon wave the plans through in a bid to appease China. That mega embassy of the CCP will be one of the largest spy centers the Chinese Communist Party has in the entire world, because that's how they use these things. They use it to puppeteer the United Front. It says this as well. Whitehall sources say staff at the British Embassy in Beijing are languishing in a crumbling building with the water cut off for hours on end, and they are even being forced to use a squash court as a temporary office. The CCP is harassing them. Oh, we can't have our mega embassy? We'll make your embassy torturous. It says one source said that despite a $100 million contract being awarded in 2020 by the Foreign Office, China has refused to allow work to start while its own plans are in limbo. We don't get our brand new embassy, you don't get to enjoy yours. Now, like alongside this, there are growing concerns over what I've been warning about for years. I've been warning about this for almost 2 decades. The Chinese Communist Party is infiltrating the United States. It's trying to use this as a form of malign influence, targeting our government, targeting key officials, targeting what they call the civil society, all of the leaders of the country. Leadership capture is the way they put it. They want to control the politicians. They want to control the journalists. They want to control the business leaders. They want to control the entertainment industry. Think Hollywood. They want to control these key factors because if they control these key factors, they control information, they control politics, they control the economy, they control the hearts and minds of the nation. If they can control the outlets of information, the power, holders, they control the country. The CCP has an entire branch of its government dedicated to this called the United Front Work Department. The United Front Work Department also works with the Chinese Communist Party's military, the PLA, with the political warfare branch of their military. They have an entire branch of their military dedicated to this. And they work hand in hand with each other, running their puppets through the consulates and embassies, which then go and infiltrate foreign countries in every circle of influence. A shocking number of countries, I would say right now, are very close to becoming puppet states of the CCP. Now, Fox News says this. It says Chairman Xi Jinping, head of the Chinese Communist Party, is clearly chosen. It says Xi Jinping is waging war on U.S. soil through his United Front strategy. This is Fox News saying it. It says a series of influence activities that shape how the American people behave and think, aspiring to manipulate us en masse. Exactly what I've been saying for almost 2 decades. It says as well, Xi Jinping has deployed every element of his malign influence in America's homeland, intertwining China into food supplies, investment funds, schools, medicine, home life, and more. While the federal government can act to secure the outer shell of national security broadly, the invasive nature of China's plot must be met with on-the-ground counteractions. States must support their national partners by learning from each other how to best remove the CCP from our homeland. I'll add to this, actually, last year, Congress called in the heads of 25 U.S. government agencies, the USDA, different ones, right, talk about the farmland, 25 agencies, asking them, how are you being targeted by the CCP? What are you doing about it? What are your relations with the Chinese Communist Party, and so on? They found that not only does the CCP have massive influence over government agencies, business ties, financial interests, individual ties, but almost nothing is being done to stop it. Almost nothing. In fact, they bend over backwards in many regards, letting the CCP do things that we would not allow any other country on earth to do. The Chinese Communist Party has been running rampant. The Chinese Communist Party openly runs these operations. The Chinese Communist Party is openly allowed to have businesses lobby our government on behalf of the Chinese Communist Party, which raises the question of whether some major corporations need to register as foreign agents of the Chinese Communist Party. The Chinese Communist Party has been allowed to censor Hollywood. The CCP has been allowed to pressure journalists on what they can and can't say. The Chinese Communist Party has been allowed into the pockets of just about every American youth through things like TikTok, feeding them whatever algorithms they want, although that's starting to change kind of right now. Unfortunately, some of the companies being given that contract also work with the Chinese Communist Party. They're infiltrating our country, controlling our country, and we're doing almost nothing to stop it. But hopefully that's changing now. Fox News also says this, quote, China has implanted itself into almost all industries that touch everyday life in this country. It has acquired Smithfield Foods, America's largest pork supplier, and purchased hundreds of thousands of acres of farmland, giving it a chokehold on food supply chains. It says it can weaponize investments in its companies in public pension funds. Notably, a lot of American pensions are being sent to China. It says the CCP commands Chinese Student and Scholars Associations, CSSAs, on college campuses to quash free expression by disrupting speaker events it views in opposition to its worldview and Confucius classrooms in K-12 schools to raise a generation sympathetic to its ideology. I would actually raise one more point with this, with the CSSAs, and it's good to see they're actually noting it. The Chinese Communist Party's Chinese Student and Scholar Associations, they also work to groom CCP agents and place them into government agencies. They can actually grow the careers of targets and then have them apply for jobs within targeted businesses, investment firms, police, government, anything. They can have them apply for a position at the USDA. They can have them apply for positions in the FBI if they wanted to. The question is, what are we doing to stop it? The simple answer as of now is very little to almost nothing. Now, the official account of the House Select Committee on the CCP responded to all of this, and it wrote on X, quote, China's malign influence is not abstract. It tries to influence supply chains, schools, and more. State and local leaders must stay vigilant and protect their communities. Now, look, on that point, this information is coming to the surface right alongside something very odd that happened in Philadelphia. The Chinese Communist Party's flag was just raised over the City Hall in Philadelphia. Representative John Molinar of Michigan commented on this during an interview on Steve Bannon's War Room.
One thing I wanted to tell you about is recently, in Philadelphia, they raised the flag of the Chinese Communist Party, honoring the Chinese National Day, which was the foundation of the Chinese Communist Party. This is in the city where our Declaration of Independence, endowed by our Creator with inalienable rights to life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, our Constitution was developed there. And when you consider that flag raised over the city hall of this great city, it's the example of how these relationships need to change, because it's been totally co-opted by the United Front operation of the Chinese Communist Party influencing here in America.
And you know what? He's spot on. The Chinese Communist Party has been allowed to do this for a very long time. They've been doing it mostly in the open for a very long time. And I would actually add something to it. They've gotten complacent. They've gotten complacent because they pushed it too far. They've gotten complacent because they stopped hiding their operations. They've gotten complacent because they're raising their flag over a city hall. They've gotten complacent because they do it out in the open. And they've gotten complacent because, you know what, people are waking up and seeing it now. And finally, something may be happening. People are waking up, they're pushing back, and we may see actions to finally uproot the Chinese Communist Party and its systems of malign influence in the United States. Now look, another topic. A young woman was stabbed, murdered in a train in North Carolina. Horrifying video. Most of us saw it. And in light of this, the General Assembly there, they've now passed a law in her honor, hopefully stopping something like this from ever happening again. At least something that could be preventable. Newsweek said this. It says North Carolina has passed a bill in the wake of Irina Zorotuska's fatal stabbing to curb crime in the state. This is House Bill 307, also known as Irina's Law, seeking to change pretrial release conditions for people charged with violent offenses, among other measures. Further, in its state, the state Republicans introduced House Bill 307, which the Senate passed on Monday and the House on Tuesday. Now signed into law, by the way. It says the bill proposes removing cashless bail, something that we're talking about throughout the entire country. Cashless bail is a new thing. It's not an old thing. But cashless bail has been part of the whole, woke identity politics going into the DAs and local policing, allowing criminals to go free over and over and over again, continue victimizing the American people over and over and over again, and committing murders, rapes, and other heinous crimes over and over and over again. Hopefully this will stop this. It says this. The bill proposes removing cashless bail and allowing officials to order mental health evaluations for defendants. It also suggests adding a, quote, aggravated sentencing factor to those who offend on public transport. It says the legislation also includes a measure to revive the death penalty in the state, an amendment that Senate Democrats voted against. And it says the bill passed the House 81-31. Most people voted to pass it. Now look, on that point, this is partly in response to the fact that the guy accused of murdering this young woman had 14 prior convictions. This guy was a career criminal. This guy was violent. He even warned that he was violent. He even called the police on himself because he was concerned that he would do something like this. They let him out over and over again. He was allowed to roam the streets over and over again. And even he called the police because even he was afraid of himself. He was out on cashless bail at the time he allegedly murdered this young woman. He should have been in prison, and Irina should still be alive. Now let me show you what the law actually says. This is House Bill 307, Irina's Law. It says the proposed committee substitute for House Bill 307 would enact Irina's Law and do the following. Here's what it does. Provide for a new procedure to have defendants with suspected mental health issues to be evaluated for involuntary commitment. Now, notably, that's also a nationwide issue right now. President Donald Trump has cleared the way that if states want to have involuntary commitment, they can now do it. Trump is not doing it from the federal level. It has to happen at the state level. Notably, several states have things kind of like this. California, of all places, actually does have some degree of this, where they have a separate prison system for people with mental illnesses. Again, if you're a mentally ill criminal, you have to actually be a criminal to be part of it. This is now a movement taking place across the United States. They might bring back mental institutions. Now, the other one they're going to do is modify the laws related to pretrial release to provide stricter guidelines for defendants charged with violent offenses and defendants with extensive criminal histories. The idea is, why does bail exist? Bail is not meant to be a punishment against the poor and an open door for the rich. Pretrial holdings are not meant to punish the individual. It's meant to protect the public from people who might be a danger. That's the reason they have it. Now, they've said before that leniency on the criminal is cruelty to the victim. And we've seen that. When you're lenient on people who are violent, who believe they're violent, who warn that they're violent, who go and say they might kill someone, and you let them free and then they do it, who's to blame for that? Is it the guy who said, hey, I'm worried I'm going to do it again? Or is it the guy who says, here's the door, buddy, have fun? Which one is held responsible? Currently, nobody, actually. But they may change that. They may bring back where, again, if you're violent, if you're a threat to the community, they can keep you in jail. Another thing here, eliminate the condition to release a defendant on a written promise to appear, because lo and behold, a criminal, what defines a criminal? They don't mind breaking the law. And what happens when you ask them, hey, just sign this paper and tell me you promise. Do you promise you're going to come back? Yes, Judge. And what happens? They often do not. Now, one reason they don't want to do this is because they do this a lot with illegal immigrants, and you can't really trace them afterwards, and they just don't show up again. Another thing they want to do, modify, and also there's no punishment for it. Oftentimes they don't show up again, and there's no punishment. Nothing happens. Why have a law if there's no repercussions for it? Another thing here, modify the laws related to aggravated factors considered at sentencing to provide that committing a crime in a public transit system is an aggravated factor to be considered. In the United States, there are a lot of enhancers. If you commit a violent crime based on a hatred of a person's race or ethnicity or religion or political views, you can get charged with hate crime. That's an enhancer. If you commit crime on an airplane, there might be an enhancer. They're arguing a public transit system should also have an enhancer. And part of the reason for this is you want to make people not afraid to use these public services. You want to make young women be able to go on the train at night and not have to worry about it as much. Now, it's not going to stop everything, but it does work as an additional barrier, saying if somebody does something, the repercussions for it are much greater. They also want to modify the laws, it says, related to oversight and discipline to magistrates to mandate new rules related to conflicts of interest and allow oversight by the Chief Justice. Is there a conflict of interest? Have you expressed viewpoints that would maybe taint your view of this individual? Do you identify with them based on race or religion? Have you made statements suggesting that you are biased in this case and you will judge things by systems outside of the law? Do you wear the blindfold that Lady Justice is supposed to wear, or do you peek under that blindfold and then weigh things based on what you see? That is the question. Justice in the United States is supposed to be blind. Justice is supposed to be weighed by set laws. Justice is not supposed to be weighed by identity politics. And that's how it has been weighed for a very long time. The opposite of the way it's supposed to work. Also, it says, direct the North Carolina collaboratories to study mental health in the justice system and certain other issues. Again, because they're saying that mental health issues are a large contributor to crime. I would actually note on that you'll find very few mentally healthy people who are willing to kill another person. Typically, I'd say something has to be wrong with your head to commit this in the first place. And so the question is, well, if only the mentally ill commit major crimes for the most part, should we be allowing mental illness to be a way to avoid punishment? Does that just not legalize crime, right? They also want to prohibit the Task Force for Racial Equity and Criminal Justice from being recreated. Again, racial equity, equity being equality of outcome. again, a system to make it so that, hey, you know what, there's too many people of this race in prison, too few of this race. How do we solve it? Well, stop charging people of this race. Stop imprisoning people of this race. Let them all go. Be lenient on them. And then what happens? You legalize crime against certain groups of people, which we've seen in the United States. Also says modify death penalty proceedings to provide that appeals and post-conviction motions for appropriate relief must be heard within 24 months of the triggering events, and to provide that the venue for any proceeding related to a death penalty case must be in the county of conviction. Again, trying to get death penalties again. Long process, very difficult, but they want to bring it back. Also, modify certain procedures for involuntary commitment of a defendant found incapable of proceeding, oftentimes someone with a severe mental health issue. Also, extend the terms of probation and post-release supervision for youth adjudicated of certain violent offenses, and clarify a victim's right to be notified about termination of probation or post-release supervision. Unfortunately, in the United States, many major crimes are committed by career criminals who get started very young. You're talking 12, 14, 15-year-old kids. You're talking kids who are in the system ongoing. And what happens? You end up like the guy who allegedly killed Irina. You end up with guys like that who've been career criminals committing crimes since they were teenagers and basically just base their entire lives around crime. They get arrested, they get charged, they go free because they're a minor, and they keep doing it. There's no punishment for it, so they keep going out on the street. They keep committing crimes, and before you know it, that teenager is an adult murdering people. What do you do about that? Maybe have some stricter punishments for teenagers to make sure they learn a lesson and don't keep doing it. Also, it says, provide for funding to allow the Mecklenburg County District Attorney, Prosecutorial District 26, to hire 10 additional full-time assistant district attorneys and 5 full-time legal assistants. In other words, getting rid of the bottleneck, making sure they can prosecute more crimes, and trying to set things in place where they can deal with more issues like this. Now look, speaking of crime, President Donald Trump has a new anti-crime focus. He's looking right now at Chicago. He's also looking at Portland. And Portland in particular is interesting because, well, Portland is one of the main focal points of the newly designated terrorist group Antifa. And now, well, Trump's operations in Portland are being blocked by a district judge. How dare you try to stop Antifa from attacking federal agents, attacking journalists, and again, from having police arrest the journalists rather than Antifa. Fox News says this: a U.S. District Court on Saturday issued a temporary restraining order to halt the Trump administration from deploying 200 National Guardsmen to Portland, Oregon, amid violent anti-immigration and customs enforcement protests. It says the lawsuit brought by the state of Oregon and city of Portland argued the deployment was unlawful, exceeding the president's statutory and constitutional authority. In other words, the same kind of lawsuit brought in California. Basically, in the United States, we've already seen this kind of action get overturned. Trump, so far, does have the right to do this. The way the Constitution has it, the way the law is set up is this. Normally, if you want to deploy the National Guard, it has to be accepted by the local governor, sometimes the local city. The president can bypass that. He can bypass that if the National Guard is being deployed to defend federal agents or federal buildings. That is the grounds on which Trump is deploying the National Guard. In Los Angeles, Trump was challenged on this also. They brought it through the legal system. In the end, they found that Trump is in fact allowed to do this, but the lessons from LA are not being applied elsewhere. And now in Portland, the exact same type of lawsuit is happening right now. And what this will do is temporarily block Trump from doing it. It might delay it by several months. It might make it harder for Trump to do anything. And it said Judge Karen Immergut, appointed by President Donald Trump in 2019, granted the restraining order blocking the federal action. So Trump basically being blocked from carrying out these operations in Portland as of now. Although we've seen before, sometimes when this happens, they just keep doing it and they're saying, look, we're not going to listen to this judge because we believe the judge is not acting in line with the law either. The Trump administration has been doing that. Now, look, in addition to this, There are also allegations that Antifa, the violent terrorist group now designated, may have influence even within the police in Portland. And that is concerning. In fact, there are even documents coming out suggesting this, that there are ties, personal ties among some of the leadership, that they may be in fact protecting Antifa rather than targeting them, that they're allowing them to attack ICE agents and not doing anything about it. And then when people try to challenge them, it's the people who challenge them who get arrested, but not Antifa. Now, is that just because of oversight? Is that just because, well, Antifa's not in the violent one here? Well, not according to evidence. But these allegations that there's corruption within the system is actually now sparking something else. The Department of Justice is now launching its own investigation into potential corruption within the system itself in Portland. The Hill said this: the Department of Justice is investigating the Portland Police Department in Oregon, days after a conservative influencer was arrested amid a federal crime crackdown in the city. Happened again when a conservative journalist was on the streets there trying to, again, record the attacks on ICE. Antifa followed him, got in his face, blocked him, assaulted him. Again, he pushed back a tiny bit. They shoved him, threw him off an area. He hit the ground. They continued to assault him. He was arrested. He's being charged. None of the Antifa members are. Now, who's guilty? Is this an issue of the cameras rolling at one point and not the others? We don't know yet, but we'll soon find out. Harmeet Dillon, it says, the DOJ's Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights, quote, signed, sealed, and delivered a letter to Portland police about the investigation on Friday, according to a post from her X account. In a separate post, it says Dillon said that she spoke with Nick Sorter, that was the influencer who was arrested outside an Immigration and Customs Enforcement ICE facility on Thursday. And she also said she talked to Attorney General Pam Bondi, quote, about what is happening in Portland and urgent need for a federal civil rights investigation over there. Are the criminals being allowed to run free? Are the innocent people, again, being victimized? And who is the system protecting? Is it protecting the criminals or the innocents? Is the system protecting the terrorists or the victims? Is the system protecting Antifa, or is it protecting the people they're targeting? And are they working with the Antifa groups? That's the question. It says Sorter's among 3 people arrested outside an ICE facility on Thursday. He was released on his own recognizance, according to the Multnomah County Sheriff's Office. And it says, following the news from DOJ, he shared a copy of Dillon's letter on X. And further, it says this: the government has requested body camera footage and details about why multiple journalists have been attacked there in Portland, and the police seem to do nothing about it, wrote in the Friday letter. Really important questions to be asking, right? And there are also allegations that police in Portland have been given stand-down orders when facing Antifa, that they've actually been given orders from the top, that local officials are telling police, do not go after Antifa. Do not arrest Antifa. Let them do what they want. Stand down. Is that the case? Well, there are actual documents stating this. There are people making claims publicly stating this. There are people giving excuses on why they're not arresting Antifa stating this. Is that really the case? Well, there are investigations now underway, and we may finally soon get the answers. And it's not just Portland either. We've seen across the United States that Antifa terrorists, people with Antifa, people with that group, oftentimes when they attack people and people fight back against them, the people who fight them get arrested. Antifa does not. The people who try to challenge them face criminal charges. Antifa does not. The victims of Antifa need to flee the country, as some have. The victims of Antifa deal with harassment, threats of violence. Nothing happens to them. Why is that? Is it because somebody or something is protecting them? Is it because something is allowing them to do this? Why are they not censored on the internet when they make death threats? Why are they not targeted and investigated when they make death threats? Why are they not targeted when they make terroristic threats? Even cases, notably, where members of the group have even shot agents, even killed people. Is that not treated as terrorism? Why are they allowed to do it? Why are they not investigated? Why is it that evangelical Christians were labeled as extremists? Why were devout Catholics labeled as extremists? Why were, again, MAGA supporters labeled as extremists? Why, during the 2020 elections, did they have lockdowns? If you had a church, you were forced to lock down. If you tried opening up, they sent agents to force you to open. Why was it that people trying to do that were shut down, locked down, attacked, investigated, charged criminally? But if you wanted to go out and riot and burn down your community, you were allowed to. Why is this? Well, maybe soon we're going to get answers. And the investigations now underway, again announced publicly, are looking into this. Again, we'll see what happens. That said, questions, comments, anything you want to talk about, leave it in the chat. Let's jump into some questions. And quick note, you might notice that I'm not in my normal office. I'm actually using Roman's office. He does Facts Matter. One of his, he has a couple. But actually, we're moving to a new office right now. So this is my in-between office between the move, which should be completed hopefully within, I think by the end of next week. Also, I'll be traveling this week as well for some interviews, so you'll see me remote, I think, on Wednesday, but I'll still be here. Normal schedule for everything. Let's see, in terms of questions, first question here. Jared Donahue, you're saying, how would it go down if USA did that to China or Putin? Yeah, right? So you're talking about this whole system where we discovered right here in New York City and then in New Jersey and then 5 other locations, they had systems and like equipment set up where they were trying to shut down the electric grid or shut down the phone system. Now, I should note some of what happened with this. So did anybody see that story? It was pretty shocking just a couple weeks back. They found this facility in New York City right ahead of the United Nations meetings. When Donald Trump was facing issues, someone turned off his teleprompter. As soon as he stepped foot on the escalator, somebody shut off the escalator. Trump is raising questions of whether somebody was intentionally doing that, harassing him while he was there. Then what happens right alongside that? The Secret Service, I'm not talking like, New York Police Department, the Secret Service raids a facility right near where the events are being held. And inside that facility, they find this giant server farm. They find hundreds of thousands of SIM cards. They find network equipment, and they come out with crazy allegations that this system could have been used to shut down the entire phone system in New York. It could have been used to target elected officials. They said that people within that area were actually targeting elected officials, calling in the SWAT team, harassing them. That's, of course, where they come in with their guns, they point them at your face, and they say, get your hands up, take 20 steps back and that kind of thing. And it's a very dangerous situation. If you bring your hand down too quickly, they might think you're reaching for a gun and shoot you. If you believe you're being, home invaded, you might defend yourself not knowing it's the police, and they might shoot you. It is a dangerous, life-threatening thing. And it turns out the Chinese Communist Party was running that. They were targeting influencers and they were targeting elected government officials. That should raise alarms over everybody. Now, according to Jared, you're saying, how would it go if the USA did that to China or Putin? They would call it an act of war and an act of terrorism. You would never hear the end of it. You would never hear the end of it. So why are we not doing that? Why is the United States not publicly calling out the CCP on this every single day? Because this is such a massive issue. Why are we not calling it out? Unfortunately, I'd say it's because we have too much financial interest and we're too deeply infiltrated by their agents. There are too many people within businesses lobbying our government. There are too many people within the military influenced by the Chinese Communist Party. Too many media organizations take money from the CCP. Too many media organizations have their parent companies deeply in bed with the Chinese Communist Party. Again, about 5 mega corporations control most of the media in the United States, and most of those mega corporations are deeply in bed with the Chinese Communist Party, as are many of their investors. Many of their top investors are like intertwined with the Chinese Communist Party. Why is it that local officials are not calling this out? Some of them are. They're actually getting very good on it. I do think that if this happened anywhere else in the world, it would be the biggest story in the country. It would be the biggest story in the country. And so it's fair to ask, why is it not here? Why is this not raising alarms everywhere? Veteran Meme Maker, you're saying, if an entire CCP cyber shutdown setup was already ready to silence New York, how many other cities are staged for sabotage, of which we do not yet know? Well, they're investigating right now. So after the one in New York, they found one in New Jersey, and they uncovered 5 other locations where they had equipment being stored. Like, that's a big deal. Now, I'd assume it's not just New York and New Jersey. I would actually assume this is across the entire United States. Another point on that also, the CCP has a publicly disclosed, it's pretty secret, but still public, military program that actually describes attacks like this. It's called the Assassin's Mace. The other translation for it is the trump card strategy. And basically, the way the CCP plans this, the Assassin's Mace, if we were to go to war with the Chinese Communist Party, they would launch a preemptive attack to shut down our critical infrastructure. The water would be tainted or poisoned. Maybe an attack on the water purification systems. The electric grid would go offline. The phone systems would go down. They would launch then attacks on our satellites, anti-satellite weapons, using lasers, missiles, and other things. And then you would have the actual war start. Then you'd have attacks on the frontline military bases of the United States. Then you'd have targeted attacks at different locations. Then you'd have assassinations. Rather than destroying key facilities, they would assassinate the key figures who make those facilities work. That's what they describe directly in their Assassin's Mace program against the United States. I would actually add one point to that. Michael Pillsbury, China expert in his book, The 100-Year Marathon, he said that when he applied the Assassin's Mace strategy during war game operations where the United States tests things out, it was the only time the United States lost a simulated battle against the Chinese Communist Party because he applied the Assassin's Mace. If we don't uproot this, right now, we could probably still win if something happened. If we don't uproot this 10, 20 years, not only will it be mature enough for them to do it, but frankly, they will have the systems in place to carry it out, and that's when they want to carry it out. 2049, roughly, is the open date they give for it. They don't even hide it. This isn't secret. Science Chick 72, you're saying the hard truth is that most Americans would not want to endure the pain it would take to even attempt to uncouple from the infiltration of CCP. Yeah, and it raises the point too. It's like, look, if for example, like Iran was if Iran had a network set up in New York City where they could shut down our phone system, if Iran had, chips set up in our solar panels so they could shut off our solar panels and they were selling them to us, if Iran was launching swatting attacks against elected officials, if Iran had things set up like this, if Iran was pressuring our media to censor themselves, what do you think would happen to those journalists? If it came out publicly that an American journalist was working with Iran and they were taking money from Iran, or they have like a speaking, thing, or like a business tie to Iran, or they were working with Iranian front operation and they were writing articles in favor of Iran, what would happen to them? They would get criminally charged as being foreign agents. I can tell you the number of journalists with those exact ties to the Chinese Communist Party is quite a lot. It's quite a lot. The number of YouTubers who have accepted money to do propaganda for the CCP is quite a lot. In fact, I know of direct cases where people have disclosed that the Chinese Communist Party tried paying them to publish propaganda, including targeting human rights issues. In fact, Tim Pool came out publicly and he disclosed that he didn't accept it. Tim Pool came out publicly and said a Chinese Communist Party agent tried paying him $200, not a lot of money, but they tried paying him $200 to run hit pieces against Falun Gong, which is persecuted in China. Again, a religious group based in truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance. The CCP is doing information operations right now. They're paying people to run their propaganda. The Chinese Communist Party is inviting TikTokers on trips to China. The Chinese Communist Party is an open program right now. Any YouTuber with over, I believe, 200,000 followers is getting invites on trips to China. Has anybody seen all these like AI videos? China's living in the future and so on. It turns out a lot of that is fake. It's AI generated slop where they're artificially altering images and making it look better than it is. But they're also paying propagandists to run this stuff. Anybody see that on Instagram lately? Anybody see that on TikTok lately? Anybody see these journalists and so on going to China and saying, we all have China wrong? A lot of them are getting paid to do that. A lot of them are, again, living in the Truman Show because they're not allowed to go to the bad areas. What you're being shown is a giant mirage paid for by the Chinese Communist Party. If people were doing that for any other country, especially U.S. adversary, they would face criminal charges for it. Why do we let the CCP do it? A fair question, right? On that point, I would add one of the big answers to that is money. We have too many business ties with China. We have too much influence with China. And frankly, I'd say by this point, too many Chinese Communist Party agents have infiltrated our own government and are giving bad advice or blocking things. We've even seen this with elected officials right here in New York City. We've seen it in Los Angeles recently, where a Chinese Communist Party agent was working in one of the local political offices and was advising local officials on China policy. We've seen it in New York City, New York State. We've seen it within federal agencies and offices. Why do we allow it to happen? Well, the simple answer is money. There's too much financial interest and they don't want to take a tough stance, even though we know they're doing all of this to us. Even though they publicly state, we live, you die. Meaning, the Chinese Communist Party does not believe it can coexist on the same planet as the United States. They want to destroy us. They say it openly, and then they wave a $100 bill in our face, and people fall silent because they want that $100 bill. Money has incentivized silence. And there are people selling out the United States because of it. They are selling out the United States to the Chinese Communist Party. That is what is happening. Now, hopefully that's going to change, but as of now, that's what's going on. Martin McKenzie, so it's first off. I'll do Martin McKenzie. You said all the big cities are rapidly turning into Marxist. Organized crime, gangland, mini states of their own. Even with Tulsa, even little Tulsa is threatened with such an outcome. Our police don't want to enforce the laws. I think police want to enforce the laws. I don't want to throw the police under the bus because I believe the overwhelming majority of them actually really don't like what's going on. I know this because I've talked with quite a lot of police over the years. In fact, for a lot of them, it's really discouraging because, they're kind of caught in the middle. You know what I mean? The police from the left, they're the ones having people shout in their face, pig, how dare you take money for this? They're the ones having people shout in their face, all cap, ACAB, right, writing it everywhere. They're the ones having people shout in their face, defund the police. They're the ones dealing with that entire side of things. They're the ones, when they go and arrest somebody. Okay, look, do you know what most police work is? Most police work is filing paperwork. Maybe not most, but like a lot of it is. You arrest somebody and you have to file this huge amount of paperwork. And then you have to get trainings from groups like, ACLU and stuff to make sure that you know about trans rights and human rights and DEI. You have to sit through it and listen to this stuff. If you arrest somebody and you get their gender wrong because they identify as a five-spirit tree elf or something like that, they might sue you. Some states make it so they can sue you and you have to pay for your own legal fees. The police deal with this stuff. They deal with this stuff and it's crazy for them. They go and try to there's a guy who's a career criminal. They go to the guy's house and half the community comes out with their cell phones and they're recording him. And if the guy comes out with a knife slashing at the police officer and the police officer has to defend himself, the police officer maybe loses his job, gets doxxed by all the media, has his reputation destroyed, has to go into hiding because him and his family are having their identities made public. That's what they deal with. I feel so bad for police. Like, I feel so bad for them, right? And then like, you know, on top of that, then they deal with the other side because like people are like, why aren't you doing anything? Could you imagine? Like, why aren't you doing anything? They're like, because I'm not allowed to. Like, look, if they help ICE, they get charged with a misdemeanor crime in some states. Like, if you're in California because they have sanctuary city laws, you get charged with a misdemeanor crime. You probably lose your job and you like have to like, you know, you're convicted with a crime. Like, and the media attacks you. Like, they deal with so much. On that point though, the guys who are, you know, more involved with this, a lot of it's the DAs. It's like the district's attorneys. Because, you know, a lot of them were in this whole woke, you know, defund the police, equity, you know, identity politics thing. George Soros himself came out publicly, even writing in Wall Street Journal, that he was backing the political campaigns of various DAs based on DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, because he wanted these types of things. And so the DAs just let him go. You know, like the DAs, you get these people, these criminals, they just, like, here's the door, buddy. You know, they do that. And so that's part of the problem. And, you know, the problem is, as Mona Van Voren notes, right, laws are only good if you can actually enforce them. And that is true. And that's what a lot of Americans are seeing as well. A lot of Americans are seeing that you can't really enforce the law anymore, or you can't really have laws if laws are not enforced, right? Does a rule exist if the rule is never applied? Well, you know, and it raises the question too, are we a lawless nation? I wouldn't say we're lawless, but it is selective enforcement. I'd say we're politically motivated lawless. On one side, if you commit crimes, you can do it. On the other side, if you commit crimes, you're held to like a very strict interpretation of the law. That has happened in a lot of areas. I think Portland, what's happening now, where journalists are getting arrested, but Antifa is not, perfect example of that. And I'll note one more point on Martin's question. You were saying all big cities are turning into Marxist organized crime gangland, many states of their own. That's the other side too, is when you allow certain criminals to be politically protected, the criminal elements become political, basically. It's a two-way street. If the mafia can get political protection, the political system becomes part of the mafia. If let's say the local agencies within a state work with Antifa, they become interconnected with Antifa, if that is in fact what's happening, where they're giving directives to like protect them. It only happens for so long where, you know, you're going to end up with a gangland. It can only go like that for so long before the system becomes corrupted by the protected criminal elements. Because if they're ideologically supporting, defending, you know, backing those people, what's the difference between that and any other kind of support? You do end up with a crime state in that case. You end up with a gangland in that state. Ashley from California, you're saying, what does decoupling from the CCP actually look like? How long would it take? Years, decades? And how do we weed out compromised politicians out of power? A few points on this. What does decoupling from the CCP actually look like? Different proposals on that. Some, like Gordon Cheng, say we should have no relations with the Chinese Communist Party. We should basically treat them like a terrorist organization or a gang, just a criminal enterprise. Many people have noted the CCP actually functions like a mafia. If you were to ask me, we should treat them as we would any other country. We give them special treatment. They have most favored nation trading status. They're designated as a third world country. They're designated as like a developing country. We allow them to do things we would not let any other country do. I think that if we held the CCP to the exact same standards we hold to Russia and Iran and other countries that publicly state their opposition to the United States and act in opposition, because the CCP does more against U.S. interests than Russia or Iran. It actually does. If we just treated them by the same standard of law, we would not let them do most of what they do. If Russia tried censoring Hollywood, what do you think the president would do? He'd say, you can't do that. right? They do something. When the CCP tries to censor Hollywood, what do? Have fun, kids. When you find another country trying to influence the media, threatening them, strong-arming them, buying them off, what happens? You criminally charge the journalists who did that as foreign agents. You go after them. You then target the country with sanctions or tariffs, saying you cannot censor the American press. You know, part of the standards we have as a country and a constitution is the First Amendment, one of the most basic rights we have, freedom of the press and freedom of speech. How dare a foreign country try to silence the American media? That's how we would normally handle it. We don't hold the same standard with the CCP. We let them do it. When the Chinese Communist Party threatens an American business because one of the employees calls out the CCP, take the NBA, for example, where Enes Kanter Freedom is punished because, he's Muslim and he writes a message on his shoe against the CCP using Muslims for slave labor, the Uyghurs, while you have guys kneeling on the court right next to him, protesting the United States and historical slavery. Imagine that. You have one of your teammates kneeling on the court next to you against the United States in historical slavery, like in the 1800s, right? He's kneeling on the court next to you. And you're like, yeah, I oppose slavery. And you write a message on your shoe, end Chinese Communist Party slavery, and you get punished. How does that happen? In what reality is that normal? You get punished for criticizing modern day current slavery. And you can criticize America for it, but you can't criticize the CCP for it? In what universe is this normal? The CCP then pressuring American businesses to punish people like that? If any other country were to do that, the United States would say something. It would sanction them. It would do something to punish them. It would go after the business and it would say, what is your influence from this country that you would punish one of your own employees? That's what would happen. Why do we not hold the CCP to the same standard? Again, across the board, if we found that Iran or Russia had hundreds of front organizations with tens of thousands of members who are infiltrating political circles and business circles, we would shut it down as one of the largest spy operation crackdowns in American history. We would shut it down. We would deport them. We would expose it. With the Chinese Communist Party, we let them do it. They just let them do it. They let them. And then when you find massive operations to shut down the phone networks, do swatting operations against American officials, hacking everything, what is the punishment? Currently, nothing. Nothing. If we found that Iran was doing that, it would be massive. We'd sanction them. Every official in the country would be calling them out. Every media would be talking about it. It would be the biggest story in the country. The Chinese Communist Party does it, and it's crickets. Why is that? Why is that? Maybe it's because a lot of people are compromised. Or maybe it's because there's too much money. Maybe there's too much financial interest and they don't want to do it. But I would actually say the thinking of the CCP in taking down the United States is this. They believe the weak point in a capitalist system is material interest. They believe that the weak point is the fact that they can buy people off, and so far they've been allowed to do it. The big question is, how many people have they bought off? How many people are compromising the interests of the United States because of money? How many people, because they're making money, are willing to throw their own country under the bus? How many people are sacrificing the basic rights of Americans? How many people are allowing massive human rights abuses, live organ harvesting to happen, and saying nothing about it because of money? Horrifying news just came out. Gordon Chang, China expert, just posting about it. New report came out from the World Organization to investigate the persecution of Falun Gong. They found the Chinese Communist Party has been farming infants for organ harvesting. They're harvesting the organs from babies in China. Gordon Chang just exposed part of it. They're artificially inseminating women, having the women deliver their babies, and they're using the babies like meat on a shelf for organs. And we work with this country and we don't call it out. This is, first of all, the persecution of a religion. A lot of these individuals are people who practice Falun Gong. But look, religion or not, would we ever allow that to happen? What is happening to our country? What is happening to the soul of the United States that we don't condemn this, that we allow this to happen? We don't call them out for it. What nightmare situation how many media are even telling you about this, frankly? How many media have you even heard mention this? The CCP is artificially inseminating women who are religious believers, persecuted for their religion, making them get pregnant, using them like hosts, making them deliver babies, taking their babies, murdering their babies, and harvesting their organs. What sick, sick people do that, and what sick, sick people allow it? Why don't we call it out? Because of money. What a disgusting excuse. I'm sorry. What a disgusting excuse. Hopefully something will be done about it. Former flag girl, you're saying money is the Achilles heel of capitalism. Yeah, and unfortunately, when we allowed ourselves to open up to the CCP and we allowed them to use the printing of money, the CCP is allowed to do false reporting on its economy. We're not allowed to even investigate their companies. The normal form of auditing you have when a company is publicly traded, we're not allowed to do it to China. If an American businessman or investor is working in China and they talk about the true state of the Chinese economy, we let them arrest these investors and business leaders. The Chinese Communist Party's economy is a giant Ponzi scheme. Almost everybody who works in finance knows this. And it's the big thing you don't say out loud because nobody wants to talk about it. Why? Because of money. Because they make money. We know that they do currency manipulation. We know they do artificial, counterfeit bills. We know that they, fumble their economy. We know they fumble their GDP. We know that they lie about the true state of the Chinese economy to lure in foreign investors, and we let them do it. And not to sound like a broken record here, but why do we let them do it? Because people are making money. And money for them is more valuable than the future of the United States. Money for them is more valuable than an infant being murdered for its organs. Money for them is more valuable than a person believing in God and being persecuted for believing in God, and a young woman being forcibly impregnated, having her baby torn from her arms and murdered for money, and we don't do anything about it? What are we becoming as a nation if we allow this to happen? Where are we heading as a nation if we allow this to continue to happen? These are serious, serious questions to be asking. But I think we need to seriously start demanding answers, because so far we're not doing anything to stop it. I hope to God that this changes. I really do. Because I think if this continues, as I've said it again and again, if we allow this to continue, we are going to lose our country. And it's going to look like this. Our government slowly gets taken over by foreign influence. Our government gets slowly taken over by foreign spies infiltrating agencies. Our government gets slowly taken over by this multi-stakeholder capitalism model where NGOs and media and big corporations are pulling the strings of politics, and all of them have deep ties to the Chinese Communist Party because they've been infiltrated and influenced. And as we see, they're already fallen in line with the CCP. They already do it. Where is our country heading if we don't stop this? Fair question to ask. I hope to God we start doing something about it. If America really does stand for freedom of speech, if we really do stand for freedom of religion, if we really do stand for this idea of what government represents, which is that government is instituted among men to protect God-given rights, if we truly stand for what we claim to stand for, I hope we begin speaking out about this, and I hope to God that something is done to stop it, because if we don't, we will lose this country, and I love this country. I hope this changes. That said, rough note to end on, but a lot going on. Join me again tomorrow, folks. Well, let me know what you think in the chat. Do you think there's a way to solve this? Do you think fully decoupling is the only hope? A lot of people argue that. Maybe that is the hope. Do you think that just holding the CCP by the same standard of law we hold everybody else to is the hope? I don't know. You tell me. Should we treat them like we did the Soviet Union? They're kind of the same thing. Well, they are the same thing. I'd say actually more nefarious in many regards. What do you think we should do about it? Do you think it violates the standards of the United States to not openly and universally call out live organ harvesting of religious believers? Tell me in the chat. What do you think? That said, join me again tomorrow, 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. In the meantime, please don't forget to like and share this video. It does help us quite a bit. And I will see you all again tomorrow. As I said, please take care of yourselves, stay informed, and stay free. Thank you.